Going live, going live. Hello, hello. What's up, guys? Hey, guys, welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. Coming to you on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening to us on iTunes right now, go ahead and leave a 5-star review. I appreciate very much all the reviews that have been left so far. Really quickly, before we start, I want to tell you guys about some of my stand-up dates. I'm going to be back on the Jersey Shore at Point Pleasant Beach for 2 dates. July 17th is going to be Comedians of the Compound at Uncle Vinny's. And then July 20th, I'm going to be at Jenks on the Boardwalk. Both of those are in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, kind of near like the Jersey Shore area. And then August 13th and 14th, I'll be in New Orleans. September 10th and 11th, Comedians of the Compound will be in Vegas doing, I think, at least 4 shows at the Plaza Hotel, the Comedy Works Club down there. And then September 17th and 18th, I'll be back in Dallas, Texas, performing at Hyenas in Dallas. Love that club. Love Texas. Just a big fan of states that are not New York. Quick shout out to my sponsor, Cushy Dreams. They are my go-to for all things CBD related. They specialize in very high quality smokable CBD, basically. But there's no THC in this stuff whatsoever. You're not going to get high. You can get all the health benefits of CBD without getting high. There's like under 0.3% THC in these products. They specialize in basically like the bud flower, which is in these tins here, and these pre-rolled joints, which I really like and prefer. I just have a couple pulls, and then within like 5 to 10 minutes, my whole mind and body feel so much more relaxed. Join the men and women who are sick of vapes and gummies and want to smoke their CBD. They're are different indica sativa strains here. So if you want to be a little bit more up, maybe you do like a hustle or an energy. But if you want to relax before bed, do like dream or relax or peace. So whatever you want to do with your day, Cushy Dreams has you covered. Best of all, it's grown here in the USA. It's 100% legal cannabis that ships right to your door. They do tons of independent lab tests to ensure compliance and purity, all of which can be found on their website, cushydreams.com, Kushy dreams.com. At the checkout, use promo code CMP. You're going to get 20% off every order. Boom! Check it out. Get you some smokable CBD. Feel less anxious. I know it worked for me. I felt less anxious. You know, you got to get over this pandemic somehow, right? All right. I'm so excited to have this guy on the podcast today. I have done his show. He is half of the infamous Cotto Gottfried show. They cover current events. He's going to talk to us about Florida, another state that is better than New York in many different ways. We're also going to talk about his new book. So very excited to have him here today. Joseph Cotto, how are you, buddy?
Doing well, Chrissie. I hope you're doing well, too.
I'm doing great. You look like you're about to start like singing on a street corner. Like you look like you're part of an a cappella band.
Well, thank you. This is the hat I always wear when I go out so I don't get, cancer on my scalp. But it's a boater hat. They've been around for a long, long time. And I guess you could say they sort of fell out of fashion, but I think they have permanent fashionability. So I wear it when I'm out. And eventually I started wearing it for Cotto Gottfried when I decided to wear the golf shirt, which is what I typically wear instead of the jacket and tie. Because that day my hair looked terrible. So I just figured I'll throw this on. And it eventually became part of my getup for the show. And I now wear it on basically everything that I do when it comes to live streaming podcasting.
I love it. You look like just like Summer Joe, it's like, I don't know. I think it's one of these things that like, they'll say, you'll hear like lame male pickup artists saying like, this was very much a thing, like probably in the 90s, like, oh, you need a funny hat. You need like a piece of interest, but that genuinely is a cool hat. And I feel like if you were like walking around, like that's the kind of hat that a lady would be like, I'm going to talk to this guy ahead of me at the deli. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. Maybe I'm just a hat girl. Maybe I'm getting into hats in my old age. I don't know.
Well, you're not that old. But anyway, as I was going to say, the hat, I never thought of it in that context, but that's good to hear. Really, it is.
And it looked like it may or may not have come with a harmonica, but that's fine. How is Florida, Joseph? What part of Florida are you in? I was just there in May. I did a show in Tampa. I was in Boca Raton, and I was in like West Palm Beach area.
I know all those areas, but I am well. I'm not terribly far from Tampa, but I am far from West Palm and Boca Raton. I'm in between Gainesville and Orlando in Central Florida, in an area that has a lot of horses and, at least traditionally, a lot of manufacturing. A very interesting combination there. So it's pretty nice. You could get to Jacksonville within 2 hours, Tampa within about an hour and 20 minutes, Orlando within about an hour and 15 minutes, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the area too. Daytona's about an hour and a half, so it's pretty cool. Florida really is a great place to be for many different reasons, but obviously the state not having some sort of prolonged shutdown is definitely one of them.
Yeah, were you guys ever really shut down?
Yes, we were, and we had I mean, it wasn't as bad as it wasn't in a lot of states, but there was a time when most people were working from home. Everybody was wearing a mask when they went out. There were mask ordinances here, but they've all since been axed. And it was a lockdown, but it was not as insane as what you'd see in other places. There was no, like as there was in Michigan, where if you go to your neighbor's house, you get a fine or go to jail. So there was a lockdown, but it was very manageable, even though it was very annoying. And it ended fairly soon. It was only for a few months, and things have been normal around here for so long that when you hear about people still having, these various lockdown issues, especially in places like Ontario, it sounds like, something completely out of this world.
It does. And I really do think that one of the big reasons that our country is not in such a horrible, like endlessly locked down situation is like, well, I'm sure like 2A might be part of it, but I feel like more so is our governors like DeSantis. I feel like he truly like paved the way and like really set the standard. Just what it means to be brave and what it means to like stand up for your state. I mean, I wish that like New York, right, Michigan, Jersey. I mean, there's so many states that were like so locked down, but like him and like who's the guy in Texas, Abbott?
Greg Abbott. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, two of the best. And I really think if it weren't for them, like I think the whole country would be so much worse off.
I suppose a shout out to Christie Nome is due as well. She's out in South Dakota. They never actually locked down at all, but it was easy for them not to do that because there's such a small population, and not to be mean, but hardly anyone ever goes there. So it's sort of, they had a more manageable state of affairs, but it's quite remarkable that places that have a lot of not just, interstate but international travel like Florida and Texas did not have these draconian lockdowns, and they did about as well or even better than states that had this insane lockdown period. So certainly, the fact that governors and even some local politicians did not go along with the lockdown to the extent that a lot of folks would have liked, that certainly, I think, made the lockdowns far less onerous than they otherwise would have been.
And like Newsom came out with this thing and he was like, what, they're not doing any more state sponsored travel to like what, Florida, Texas. Mm-hmm. To me, that just seems like a petty, like bitchy, almost like, I don't know, high school move. Like what is that? Like you're not shutting down all travel. And it's like, it's just such a small thing that I feel like it's literally just something to get a headline and literally just something to be like news, just so he can like, be like, and like we're gonna keep our people from coming to see you. I don't understand the benefit.
I think that it had to do with that trans bathroom thing or sports thing, whatever. All this stuff sort of just like runs together at this point in my mind. And I think that was the rationale. Well, it could have very well been because of COVID, he was angry, and the rationale was just the trans stuff. But California is in an interesting situation. Well, I mean, it's in many different interesting situations. But what I'm referring to is that the state has so many of mineral resources. It obviously has so many opportunities for tourism. It could be a place with an economy that is second to none. But at the same time, it's losing population, losing business. And it's rather sad to see all the wasted potential there that just basically is set on fire. And I do anticipate, obviously, that Newsom will pull it through the runoff. But the people in California just seem to like voting themselves into squalor, which I find really perplexing, because their state, even though I'm not a fan of it, I have to say it's the most beautiful one in the union by far. There's no comparison.
You mean California or Florida?
California is the most beautiful
Yeah,
state.
yeah, they got the wine going. Like, I've only been to LA. I was in LA last year, like right as things were getting locked down. It was probably like, yeah, early March, and I left like March 12th, 13th. It was wild. Like I was like buying shit that I didn't even think I would, like, for the plane back. I just remember I was pouring out. I bought many little Listerine bottles. I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to buy rubbing alcohol in bulk, pour out Listerine out of these little travel bottles, and then just poured rubbing alcohol into small so I could take them back on the plane with me. Like, what was I thinking? And I never opened them up or used them ever again. Like, it was just the oddest panic buy. I think I was in the store watching somebody else buy up a ton of rubbing alcohol. I was like, oh, I need to be able to make my own sanitizer, or like, yeah, make my own cleaning fluid. It was like it was the dumbest thing. But that's my memory of LA.
Well, I had last year when the pandemic was obviously at a fever pitch, hand sanitizer, nobody could get it unless you were in the medical field. And
also Clorox wipes, like,
yes,
that was, if you had that, you knew somebody.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But no, I had a homemade hand sanitizer made out of, I think, aloe vera and rubbing alcohol. And it was interesting. It was really sort of like a back to nature thing, even though I've never even been camping. So it was interesting. I'll say that much. I'm glad that those days are over, however.
Yeah, like back to nature, like, just rubbing my hands on some tree bark to stay. Okay, so this has been, I don't know if you've heard about this. This might be super hot news. It's the long-awaited Trump social media platform. This just came out today. It's called GETTR, GETTR. Will be the newest MAGA venture in this space. It's being led by Trump's former spokesman, Jason Miller. Wow, to me, this already looks like such a hot dating site. This looks like Tinder-esque to me.
I've not seen it, but I did, I do various predictions and such on Twitter, and sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't, but I think my track record is pretty decent. And I did say that it's inevitable that Trump's going to have his own social media platform for when he winds up running again in 2024, which I think is, at this point, as obvious as it can be that that's what he's going to do. So it'll be interesting. He's going to try to cut out the middleman of Twitter, which obviously people with reduced means such as ourselves can't do, even though we're nice. But I hope it goes well from the social media platform, because I still fear deplatforming, like what happened with Parler, which arguably the website never truly recovered from.
What did you call it?
Parler. Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm just fucking with you. That you actually probably are pronouncing it the right way, and it's probably all of us. They're like, Parler. Yeah, the site GETTR advertised its mission statement as fighting cancel culture, promoting common sense, defending free speech, challenging social media monopolies, and creating a true marketplace of ideas. The app is currently in beta form and will be officially launched on July 4th at 10 a.m. on Independence Day. Look at that. I think if this totally bombs, they should at least call it like Trump date, because that seems to be, I haven't been on a dating app in years, but that seems to be one of the main things. Like, I'll hear girls be like, and no one that's vetted for Trump,
I
just say you don't want a real man if that's the case. Hey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that Trump could make money with a specific dating platform. You know, is this just a social media one, or perhaps a social media platform will have something that people can use for dating? Because especially in areas of the country like New York, LA, where you basically live in a segregated society, if you're not a member of the trendy left, there's a huge market for this kind of thing, and it's a very much underserved market.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just how I felt like really from I think the last 6 months, I feel like I've learned a lot and I've become a lot more sensitive towards people. I think for months I was very mad. I was like, why aren't people standing up? Why aren't people like speaking out more? And then I was just like, oh, no, no, no. I'm like in such the vast vocal minority here. Like most people are truly afraid of losing their jobs and worried about not being able to support their families. I think that is why so many like MAGA people have kind of gone silent, and I think they're just sort of waiting to see Trump's next move, and perhaps this is it right here.
Mhm. I think it is, and I would say that if it's run well, which I hope it will be, it could be what he needs to cut through the media filter for 2024 and even 2022, promoting the candidates that he likes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I am cautiously optimistic about the new platform, but it is some of the best news to come around in quite a while.
Oh yeah, and now they're wondering like, oh, is it going to harvest information
Mhm.
about its users' Twitter followers? Interesting, interesting. Yeah, they like, we have an account for him. It's waiting for him. He can join if he wants. Oh, he's got to be on it. Come on. GETTR is one of the highest profile projects in a larger ecosystem of pro MAGA tech and social media platforms that have blossomed on the right. I'm like, I can't think of literally any other one. Like Parler was the only hope and it got shot down.
Oh, there was also Gab, run by some
Oh,
fella
Gab.
named what the hell is that guy's name? Andrew something or other, and he marketed it as a free speech platform, but then it turned into this sort of like religious crusade, and then he tried to mix the two, and then I think they exiled themselves from Twitter, and I heard he's even going to turn it into a bank. Literally, I heard he's going to turn Gab into a bank as well as a social media platform.
Really?
So I
Wow.
think he's basically, on a cloud nine or whatever. But yeah, but until he's not a very serious platform gap because of all the nonsense. But yeah, this Trump platform is something which is very much needed, and I really do hope that it does well. It's something of more importance than even his political career. It's about having a place where people can speak as freely as they can in a reasonable and responsible manner.
Absolutely, because one of the chief complaints I hear from people that Trump didn't do during his term, it's like, well, he didn't tackle big tech when he had the chance. He didn't do it. He didn't so this could be part of an attempt to maybe remedy that part of his legacy.
Mhm. I would say definitely. A lot of people obviously do rag on Trump for what you mentioned, but the truth of the matter is that there wasn't much he could do. He couldn't get much through in his first 2 years, the House or the Senate. Even though the Republicans had majorities in both, the Senate majority was not big, and that the Republican House at that time was not interested really in taking on big tech because
Hmm.
censorship then was not what it is now. But then when it kicked up in the last 2 years of his presidency, censorship, the House was in Democratic hands, so he couldn't do anything. People wanted him to do stuff essentially all via executive order, but
Right.
that's pretty unrealistic to say the least. There's only so much he could do. DeSantis signed a pretty sweeping anti-tech censorship bill here in Florida, but it wound up, at least as of now, it's on ice in the federal court system. So we'll see what happens. But it's really hard to go after big tech. The only way I think it could really be done seriously is to treat social media as a public utility, in which case you would at least theoretically have fairness, but then it would be regulated by the government. So that opens up a whole can of worms, which could have seriously unintended consequences. It is a complicated matter that I don't see any, easy solution for.
I'm signing an executive order. I want my Twitter account back. No, I'm not even going to pretend that I can do Trump. My solution for big tech is recruit an army of sluts, kind of along the line of maybe like Russian spies, but not like just sort of cute, like girls in their 20s, possibly 30s, recruit them and just sort of send them out into like Silicon Valley, and then they will sort of charm the men of big tech and then sort of infiltrate, whistle blow. There'll be some sort of blowing going on, but that they will ultimately, I think, influence and take down big tech. I want to do it through seduction. That's my big idea. Just like through women tricking men. I don't know. I think it might work.
It's not a bad idea. I presume trick is a double entendre there, but
You're good.
No, it wouldn't be a bad idea at all. Actually, it might be a hell of a lot easier than doing some sort of heavy duty federal regulatory thing. I think that looking at, I suppose, big tech from a broader perspective, it's really interesting how this I don't even know the word for it. This labyrinthine thing that was supposed to be decentralized, is supposed to ensure unparalleled freedom of speech via the internet. It's turned into this, sort of hellscape of censorship and people walking on eggshells, standing on pins and needles. It goes to show that even something with the best intentions can be blown to hell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure I covered through this article. Did I forget? Oh yeah, GETTR. It was supposed to be inspired by the words "getting together," but to me, it kind of looks like "get her done." Like I don't know if that's gonna be.
I don't know. I think a redneck motif would not necessarily be the best, but but no, it's interesting. As you say, GETTR, all caps lock.
Get her.
Yeah,
Get her. Go get her. Get Kamala. Get Hillary. Get her.
I think it has a unique. I look at the logo now. It looks like the T looks like it has a red flame on top of it. So
yes,
torch of liberty. So it's not bad actually. It's sort of aggressive in an interesting way. I've had flannel shirts and F-150s. That would be a little, I think, off base. But this is not bad at all.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. Oh, we got a super chat from K-Max. Thank you, K-Max. For both, where do you stand on the CRT debate about it is bad because it's Marxist or anti-Asian versus who it is actually against? Chris Rufo is one way, Scott Greer is the other. Where do you both fall?
That's I hate to ask again. Would you mind reading the question once?
Okay. Yeah, it's this is a multi-part question, which I fucking hate. Okay, where do you stand on the CRT debate about it is bad because Marxism or anti-Asian versus who it is actually against, which I assume they mean white people. Chris Rufo is one way, Scott Greer is the other. To me, without knowing very much about it at all, to me it just seems like a way to justify teaching like racism against white people.
Mm-hmm. Of course it is. There's no question about that. I think Rufo makes very, very good points against CRT. At the same time, though, and he does bring up a very important stuff about how Asians are discriminated against as well. Although I think the core of CRT is making prejudice against whites fashionable and intellectualizing it in a way.
Yes. Yeah. It's like this cool, it's like the same vibe that CNN has. It's like the same vibe in a lot of circles, like in different universities. It's like you're smarter and better and somehow more cultured if you're like shitting on America.
Certainly. And if you listen to a lot of these people talking about whiteness, if you replace whiteness with another word like, blackness, Asianness, Jewishness, whatever, it clearly sounds totally off the wall, prejudiced, and even scary in its proportions. So what they're talking about is really scary stuff with the CRT. And what I mean, the people who support CRT are pushing. And it's frightening that so many people go for this because it clearly is, just old-fashioned, mindless hatred on the basis of ancestry that has found a home in our society as some, anti-racist, ironically, thing. That really is a frightening matter, which I think bodes poorly for the future.
To me, it feels like CRT and the people that are pushing it, it's like the little kid that's like punching their dad in like the dick or something. And then, like, as the dad, like, you can't hit them back. Like, you have to be like, oh, come on, you're a kid. You don't know any better. You're just a kid. Like, however, this is not going to be good, like, long term. Like, you're punching me in the dick. Like, I don't know. I probably should have come up with a better metaphor, but like, to me it feels like, well, do we just have to be just endlessly patient with this nonsense? I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's good. I think it's damaging. But it also feels like white people have a lot of patience for this shit.
They do. There's no question. My co-host, Paul Gottfried, his family fled to the U.S. from Central Europe, and he was born in the Northeast. Soon after his family got here, they fled the Holocaust. And he mentions to me very often that the way that the woke folks act nowadays, the way that the modern left acts, reminds him so much of Nazis, and that they not only have, a state backing for what they do and backing, popular culture and such, but they are organized, they're disciplined, and they are ideological, and they are ruthless, and they are fundamentally bloodthirsty people who are appalling in every respect conceivable. So it's really scary stuff. And a lot of these people who are ironically white themselves, that go up against whiteness, this, that, the other thing, you can really see like a sort of hatred in them that is like a religious thing, really. I think it's beyond politics. They've created a new religion for themselves out of wokeness, and they're like engaging in a sort of bizarre ritual sacrifice, which I find unsettling and unsavory in too many ways to mention here.
Yeah, that sounds like another scandalous conversation for another time. Which brings us perfectly into your new book, I think. Runaway Masters, A True Story of Slavery, Freedom, Triumph, and Tragedy Beyond 1916 and 1776. Available on paperback right now for less than $10.
Yes, 1619, but here it is. And I really, the book, I have been wanting to write another book for some time, and I wanted to write something that was relevant, but I also wanted to write something that was nonfiction. People write novels all the time about either politics or whatever, and I find that to be pretty boring and needless generally, because there are so many good stories out there that actually took place and yet they've never been told. So what I decided to do was present slavery. It is such a hot issue right now, although not hot in a good way.
Hot topic.
To say the least. And I wanted to talk about it in a very, I guess you could say, accessible, conversational way.
Whoops. Everyone can see what I'm buying. Men's underwear and turtle food. All right. I've been exposed. I was just putting your book in my cart. I didn't know it would take me to the cart.
Oh,
all right.
Thank
sorry.
you very
Continue.
Much. Thank you. It's greatly appreciated.
I'm exposed.
No problem. Believe me, people have pretty interesting stuff in their Amazon carts, and that is not even does not even rank. But as I was going to say, so it's a crazy time we're living through with people who talk about history and they use it as a rationale for doing certain things politically today, but they don't really know the history. And one thing I often hear now, and I'm sure you hear it too, everybody does, is reparations. Some people think, and the book, by the way, is not about reparations. I don't even think the word reparations comes up in it once. But what I see with reparations, it's people imposing a collective guilt on those who did not do anything to cause a massive historical injustice, slavery. And they, at the same time, today, people want to deprive those who did nothing. It's really holding people responsible for something that happened before their time on the basis of bloodline, which I find to be completely unacceptable in every respect conceivable. I think it's antithetical to the concept of justice. And so I figured that writing about slavery from a perspective that most people don't know perhaps would wake them up to some realities of the slave trade. I don't sugarcoat it. I certainly don't pretend that it was some sort of, apprenticeship or something like that. It wasn't. It was a very nasty, drawn out affair. But what makes my book unique is that it focuses on the slaves held by American Indians, the Seminole tribe, who obviously, they as people who know the Seminole sports team, they they were runaways, principally from the Creek tribe, but others too. And they came to Florida, which was ruled by the British and the Spanish until the 1820s. It was ruled by the British during the time of the American Revolution, and the Spaniards got it again. They had it before the British did, and the Spaniards had it until the 1820s. And the Seminoles took slaves of their own, and they took slaves that were runaways from American plantations, and they put them into a unique form of bondage that was not like tilling the fields on a plantation. They let the slaves have their own communities. The slaves were not self-governing totally, but they were able to sort of manage their own village. But at the same time, they had to raise crops, and they had to give a percentage of their crops to the Seminole tribe. And the Seminoles eventually armed their slaves, and they trained their slaves as soldiers to fight the Americans. Once America, even a little bit beforehand, but really once America took over Florida, and the Americans tried to make a long story short, I want to give away the whole thing, force the Seminoles onto the Trail of Tears to what we now call Oklahoma. So the Seminoles fought side by side with their slaves, but eventually the federal government turned the slaves against the Seminoles by offering the slaves freedom in exchange for going to Oklahoma. And from that point on, things got very bitter between the Seminole and the people who were his slaves. So it's really interesting, and the story, it does lead up to the present day. It just doesn't stop at some point in history. It deals with race relations. It deals with racial identity, also cultural identity, how slaves perceive themselves. It deals with different types of slavery. It deals with essentially how the federal government, which people now want to use for reparations and such, made a bad situation with slavery much, much worse. And it also deals with the fact that slavery is nothing that you could say is, the fault of one race. In the case of America, people say it's the fault of whites, and everything else is immaterial. Slavery is practiced by many, many different peoples throughout history. It's still practiced by them, and I focus on one aspect of this story in Runaway Masters, and it's called Runaway Masters because the Seminoles are the runaways from other tribes, and they became prominent, slave owners, but they also had control over Florida essentially during the British and Spanish periods, which is fascinating. They didn't just control black slaves; they also controlled the white man because the whites could not settle all of Florida for themselves simply because they did not have what it took to take on the Seminole tribe. So the Seminoles were truly masters of the land. They're perhaps the only Indian tribe that ever did boss around white people, and the Seminoles never did surrender to the U.S. government either. The only tribe never to have done that.
Wow.
It's quite amazing. One faction of it did. They went out to Oklahoma, but the other faction, the Florida Seminoles, they remain to this day never having surrendered. They were allowed to live on terrible, terrible land in the Everglades without persecution.
Oh, the swamps?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
and
boy.
yeah, it's really they were offered money to relocate. Obviously, they were offered land there, but they just wanted to stay in Florida so much that even after their slaves had been turned against them and taken from them, even after they were pretty much devoid of arms and the ability to have developable land to feed themselves, they still wanted to stay here because they believed the land was their home, and it was their home. It's not that it wasn't, but it was. It's a fascinating, really heartfelt story. And in the book, I don't just talk about stuff in the abstract. I do to a certain extent, but I include actual testaments from Seminoles of the time, as well as people who knew the Seminoles. It was really, it's really an interesting story, and I would hope that when people read it, for them, it's sort of like history coming to life. I know that's something of a cliche, but I would hope that the way I put the story is it makes it as real as possible without being too tedious. I don't like books that have, footnotes and you have to look at this, you have to look at that, and it's, described in a very academic way. That's not what this is. It's a book that is 191 pages. It's people can see they're not terribly difficult pages to read.
No pictures?
Yes,
Darn.
there are pictures. There
Oh,
are.
good. Oh, good.
It's a
I'll
matter
be
of,
reading it then.
thank you. Here you are.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, yeah. I actually used paintings that were done of the Seminoles and engravings, and I think a sketch. And it's all now in the public domain, so anyone can use it. But the Seminoles, I will say this: they were greatly revered by the whites who persecuted them. Today, here in Florida, you see so many things named after Seminoles, including a county, lots of
Oh, right.
businesses, schools. So the whites, even after they did generally defeat the Seminoles, they named so much of their society after Seminole culture that it goes to show that even though they persecuted this tribe, they really did identify with it to a certain extent. That it's fascinating, and I can't think of another example, at least in Florida, where something like this has happened. But anyway, getting back to the slavery stuff, no, the book does deal with how the Seminoles had slaves. It deals with what happened to the slaves. It deals with how the whites treated those slaves. And I would say, really, in terms of slavery, I'm not going to get into too much more detail. I don't want to give it away. But my take on this whole thing of slavery is that there is always a desire among certain people to control other people and not pay people what they are due. And that's where slavery comes from. And this is nothing exclusive to any race, any nationality, any culture. It's something very dark and unfortunate within the human soul, if you will. And it gets very easily politicized, as we see now, where people use it to persecute other people, such as taking money from them for reparations. So it's a book about history, but it has a lot of relevance to the present day. Even though, as I said, I don't think I brought up the word reparations once. I didn't want to make it a political polemic. I just wanted to make it a book of sort of accessible history that anyone could really get and hopefully be engaged by. So that's my that's my soapbox. Oh, and I will say one last thing. It is now out in paperback on Amazon. It will be out in Kindle on Kindle. I don't even know how to say it correctly, on July 4th. And
hey, same day as GETTR.
Yes, it is.
GETTR. Same day as Trump's social media. Wow, I can't sit without showing the good people my cooch. I should have thought this set out better. I'm in this very sticky leather chair that it's like my skin is stuck to it. All right. You didn't need to know that. All right. Did you feel like writing this book was in a sense a way to talk about something that's going on without talking about something that's going on?
You could say that. Yes, I didn't want to. I do a lot of stuff on Twitter, and I have a Substack that I didn't pay attention to for a few months now while I was writing this. But I could write on Substack, I could write on Twitter about slavery, about this, about that. But at the end of the day, you're talking about politics in a either relatively brief form, such as through Substack, or in a very brief form on Twitter. And it's better, I think, to give people an actual story, a real story that they could use to not only understand where the society they now live in came from, but they can use it to better understand a lot of contemporary issues using the lens of history. And when you do that, I think you gain a very deep insight on whatever it is that's going on all around you. So I really I want the book to communicate history accurately, number one. But number two, I do want it to give people something to think about with regard to current events. But it's not a book it's explicitly not a book that tries to make a political point. It's not about converting someone to a certain point of view. I wrote it so people who have many different points of view could read it and take something away from it that is, I would say, beneficial. So that's it. Yeah, I did want to address something that's going on now, but I didn't want to address it in a sort of, explicit, over-the-top way, which basically would be like writing a political column.
Yeah. Have you heard of Hotep Jesus?
Yes, I have.
His feeling on reparations is yeah, let's do it, but Dems should pay. The Democrats should pay for them. I was like, that's not a bad take. Not a bad take.
It'd be interesting if that did happen. I think that a lot of people who support reparations would be very much less inclined to do so. I actually interviewed Hotep. He's a great guy to chat with. I really enjoyed the discussion. But it's pretty interesting that a lot of the people who want reparations are not, how do you put this? they wanted not necessarily to, I would say, improve the quality of life of American blacks. It's really about revenge. It's about retribution. And that spirit of revenge and retribution, if it's instilled in politics, as is becoming the case now, it creates a society that destroys itself each and every time, because everybody then views, members of this group or that group as the other, and people do very bad things when they're desensitized in that way. So I really, the situation is unnerving. It really is. And I'm tired with a pretty strong stomach, but I have to admit that it is unnerving. I really would hope that by understanding history, people from many different, political backgrounds, people different races, ethnicities, national origins, whatever, I would hope that they could at least have sort of like a deeper perspective on the present day, so they wouldn't feel the need to engage in all these political fads where, you have this, this group good, this group bad, this group's responsible for something that they weren't even alive for. That sort of stuff, I think, is very damaging to any society. And I think American society has gone to such an extent that often I call it a society, because there's so many different factions within it that are really at each other's throats, and it's not good. It's not good at all. Any country that goes down this road does not wind up better for it. So that's my take there.
Oh, absolutely. And like this was coming like even before CRT, before, I just feel like even as a woman, I never felt like taking the bait of like, you're a woman, you're weaker, you're somehow a victim. Like you need to see the world through the ways in which you're taken advantage of. It's like, well, why don't I not do that? Like, what would happen if I just like chose to be strong and like try my best? And, that stuff really pisses me off, because like if you create so many groups of people that believe that they're victims, that they're owed something, it's like you're never gonna have unity. You're never gonna have because there's many groups that perhaps deserve reparations. Like I was an intern for many years, worked for free.
We've all been there. There's no question. It would be nice to get reparations in that context.
I want reparations for my internship at Conan O'Brien. I got everybody coffee, and then nobody hired me. It's fine. I'm over it. Quick super chat from K Max. Thank you for the super chat. Cotto, how much do you reject that slavery built the entire U.S. wealth system? Sure, it contributed in the South. I do not get how it built the whole country. I hear leftists literally claim this. Yeah, I've heard this a lot too.
I reject it entirely. The truth of the matter is that the people who built the country's wealth were a very small number of people who used their minds. Slaves and people who did cheap labor, people, any background you could imagine. They were just the muscle. They built it, yes, but they were replaceable, because the people who created the economy were the ones who you couldn't do without. So they're really the ones that built it. And, it's sort of, look at it this way. Everybody knows who John Rockefeller was. Would Standard Oil have functioned if John Rockefeller's secretary had never been born, if somebody else had taken his place? Of course it would have. But if John Rockefeller had never been born, there would have been no Standard Oil. And who knows? Today out west, maybe people would, maybe solar power would have come along quite a while before, because people would have had an alternative. But it's the fact of the matter is that the whole idea of slaves building the wealth of the country is crazy. That's not to say they had no influence or had no role. They did. But I also would point out that there were different, even then, I didn't bring this up in the book at all. This isn't technically slavery, but it's very similar. There was indentured servitude, where people who obviously were white, typically of Irish background, came over to the U.S., the Northeast usually, and they worked for about 7 years without pay, and then they were given their freedom. Then we call them short-term slaves. If one's going to say that the wealth of the country is built by slaves in slave-owning states, then those indentured servants certainly should be looked at as well. And then you could look at, say, human trafficking today, sexual slavery, white slavery, as it has been traditionally called, although obviously not everybody who's involved in it is white. But I suppose if you want to take this argument, then you can say the present economy is built by human trafficking, but it's not an argument. It's not a serious argument. It's just, I think, people just sounding off. The truth of the matter is that whether it's traditional slavery, whether it's indentured servitude, whether it's human trafficking, these are all very, very bad things. And they are things that develop because people want to take advantage of others for the sake of cheap labor. And that, I think, is the worst. That impulse is responsible for so many problems in not just in American history, but history of any number of nations, that you just can't even begin to describe the terror, really, of it.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think you'd bring up human trafficking. You're red pilled AF. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think enough people. It's like what's her name? Eliza Blue on Twitter. She's all over it. She's always like, Twitter, you need to fix your sex trafficking problem. You're well, they have like a CP problem actually specifically. Thank you for that, K Max. I just want to see if there are any other interesting questions here in the chat for Joseph. Yeah, I am uncomfortable in this chair. It's like I'm glued to it.
Now, I've been there. This chair is pretty comfortable, but it actually did fall apart on me once upon a time, but it got put back together again. It hasn't given any issues for a few years, and I do hope it stays that way.
What do you think? Who has to benefit from this obsession with slavery in our culture right now?
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people would say it's sort of, I guess, the stereotypical answer would be that the Black community does, but I don't think that's true. I certainly don't see the Black community really benefiting in any tangible sense from this. I think the people who really benefit are people in academia, people in the media, people, politicians who use this to win primaries, specifically closed primaries in Democratic states, and it's a form of race baiting that takes it substitutes for more substantive issues to be brought up in election season. But then if you look at the media, they profit from it because they turn people against each other, and people are angry when they're scared and when they're spitting fire. That's when they consume media typically the most. And then academia is benefiting from this because nowadays a lot of people don't necessarily want to spend the amount of money on college that they're not going to get a great return on their investment for. But if you give them courses that are designed to meet their interests, or that's a good, kind way of putting it, that are designed to respond to their prejudices and baser impulses, then they're more likely to stay in school. So there are a lot of different people who benefit from this, and it is to the detriment of basically everyone else.
So you really think that part of why CRT is being pushed in schools so much is to kind of save academia in a way, or give it another sort of like kind of weigh it down? It's kind of like a lifeboat, like, oh, you guys need to be up on this. It's like to me, it sounds like I remember when Pride was like just taken over by all the corporations. Like I remember like my gay friends, like we'd be like, they were telling me, they're like, yeah, when did Bank of America get all like full of rainbows? Like since when have they cared? It was like very blatant, and now it's just the norm. And then we see what happened with Black Lives Matter. So is CRT just like an extension of this? Like, oh, look at us making change, when really it's just, you're just teaching a different kind of racism.
Yeah, no, I think the companies get in on this for different reasons. To a certain extent, is to tailor themselves to the millennial and Zoomer marketplace, which is uniquely predisposed toward making consumer choices on the basis of its politics. But then it's also to, I think, distract from issues of wages and benefits, and the fact that retirement plans are not what they used to be. So if you use this, this social issue pandering, it does serve the interests of the companies that are doing this. I doubt that people at the top of these places really care all that much about the people who they're pandering to, but it's a strategy that has some utility, no question about it. And then nowadays, you also do have legit ideologues working at these big businesses who are basically there to force their worldview on others through the marketplace. And it's a combination, I would say. And it's a combination of people who are very cynical, very Machiavellian, and people who are very idealistic and very evangelical in their outlook. I would say that they definitely have a sort of religious perspective. I would say that wokeness nowadays, having looked at how it actually has rituals, there are sacrifices, such as sacrificing any vestige of what I would call Norman Rockwell's America and the concept of Western civilization, of course, the concept of whiteness. There is that. There's certainly like that sacrificial urge definitely is religious in nature. But then you have like the shrine to George Floyd that I saw. You have these sort of things where people make these professions of faith, essentially. They say, I will do this, I will.
Oh God, they're on the floor praying.
Yeah.
They're in a big circle. It's like, yeah, it very much. I've seen a lot of clips that make it look like a religious service. It's like this and like worshiping the science, which is basically like it's the same shit. It's like just listening to what the TV tells you. It's not like you're mixing up your own experiments.
Absolutely, and it's and people, I would suppose, whether they be Nicole Hannah-Jones or Anthony Fauci or others, they're treated as prophets essentially. And when people look at these very fallible individuals as prophets, I suppose, of some new Bible, it's not good. It's not good for too many reasons to even begin to address here. But I think that perhaps because society is secularized so much, I'm a very secular guy. I'm glad that it's secularized, don't get me wrong. But I think that it has, because it's secularized so much and it continues to do so at a very rapid clip, it's left a lot of people who otherwise would have been religious without a congregation to belong to, and that's made them very susceptible to stuff like wokeness, which basically offers the same sort of community, rituals, and purpose in life that a religion would have. So I think a lot of Zoomers are they seem especially susceptible to this, even more than millennials are. I'm a millennial, you're a millennial, but I think the Zoomers really like this because a lot of them grew up with a lot of economic insecurity, a lot of broken homes, a lot of debt, which I guess ties into economic insecurity. They don't have relationships, whether they be friendships or romantic relationships,
yeah,
the way the previous generations did. So these people want something to turn to, and people typically turn to religion, and wokeness is the new religion, state religion, essentially.
Yeah, they're really taking advantage of like, Gen Z and right. And like I feel like millennials, like we're like a lost cause now. Like either we have families or we have cats, like we're kind of, like set in our ways. And I think like, the pandemic was like a perfect opportunity, like separate us, keep us apart, keep us not congregating, no talking, no church, no comedy, no cabarets, no gathering, no sharing of ideas, and plus all this online censorship. And then it's like if you were you couldn't design a better society splitting up mechanism than what we've been seeing the last year and a half. Ooh, super chat from Row House. Cotto, if anyone panders, it would be Bill de Blasio. Now, Chrissie says crime skyrockets and cops can't do anything. Is this stupidity or lack of care? NYC suffered this before with David Dinkins. Shout out to David Dinkins.
I was going to say that I think that what's going on now with Bill de Blasio, I think he's a rather disingenuous guy. I think that he certainly plays the progressive game quite well. At the same time, though, I don't know that he really wants to live in the sort of society which he advocates for. I think he's somebody.
No, hell no. Yeah.
He knows how to play to his base. There are, that being said, in New York politics, Chris, you'd obviously know this better than I do, but even I know that's how blatant it is. There are people who are true believers, and they're very scary people. They absolutely would light basically society on fire and think it's just great to watch it burn. And there are a lot of them out there. They're either running for office or they're voters, and it's scary. The likely, well, who the hell knows what will happen with this election in New York City now. But the man who looked like he would likely be the next mayor of New York, Eric Adams, would be sort of a turn away from this toward, he would basically be, I think, the modern day equivalent of a Rudy Giuliani. And that's good enough, although I don't even know that he would be able to do much for New York considering the state it's in. But no, I think that someone like Bill de Blasio definitely is disingenuous. And a guy like him, most certainly, he likes to have his cake and eat it too. I think that's the best way of putting it. I hope I've done justice to Row House's question here.
Oh yeah, de Blasio is totally the kind of guy that would like cross the street if he saw like a group of teenagers approaching, Or he would just be like, he'd be sitting outside at a restaurant and be like, "Oh, it's a little rough out here. Can we go inside?"
Yeah, and more and more is getting rough in New York. Yeah, even the Upper East Side, which is I was surprised to hear about, is not what it once was. It's quite shocking. It's so many people have bust in there to live in these expensive apartment blocks, and they live in proximity, excuse me, to these beautiful townhouses. And the people that I'm talking about that were bust in, they're very poor. A lot of them are homeless. A lot of them also have. They have sexual criminal records, and it's just crazy to see all this stuff happening to a place that definitely does not have to be this way.
Yeah, I think if the next mayor can just get New York City to a point where people aren't like openly doing heroin on the subway, like that would be a huge plus. Because that's just no big deal. It's the most casual thing. Like they're playing Pogs. Literally, it's like woo, doing their own little, trusting their own science in the stairwell there.
I would say so. I remember, when I was a boy, I went on the subways in New York. They had the red ones back then. I don't think they have them around anymore, but they were not bad even at night. I went with my mother and I had family there, and it would you could take them at night. It wasn't that bad. Now, a decade before, even less than a decade before, it was terrible, sort of like it is now. But it was interesting. Today, though, some of the same relatives I went on the subway with say they have not been on the subway in a year, and they refuse to go back on because of essentially stuff like you mentioned. It's really a sad state of affairs, to say the absolute least. One thing I wonder, I guess, is what will happen to like the Times Square area. When I was a boy, 42nd Street was about to get cleaned up, but it was still very unique. That's where I first saw the image of a naked lady, actually, at down the street at the peep show houses there. Of course, I never would be able to go inside, but I was just a boy. But it was fascinating.
How old were you?
I was about I think 7 or 8 at that time. Maybe a little younger. Maybe a little younger.
That's kind of young, but maybe
I was walking
I
west of Times Square in order to get to somewhere in Western Manhattan. I was walking, I remember that, with my mother. And the farther west you got from Times Square, 42nd, obviously the seedier it became. But it was interesting. And one thing that I really remember were all these men walking around. And I thought they were the skeleton men. I never seen that before. I didn't realize until many years later that they were like gay prostitutes who had AIDS. So it was this.
Wow, because you could tell they were like sunken and like they just looked sick.
But I didn't know what it meant at the time. I thought it was just like men who looked like scarecrows. But later, years later, I put
that's
two and
pretty
two.
Neat.
I mean, it was. No, I get what you mean.
But sucks, but like that's cool. Like, to see somebody with AIDS.
Well, it was revolutionary, and I saw all this stuff, and it was really it was shocking, but I wasn't terribly scared. It was sort of it was really something else, because there's always so much stuff going on at the same time. But now that's all cleaned up. Now I think it's Disney owns a lot of that. And Times Square is for pedestrians now. And I wonder if it'll go back to the way it used to be, 42nd Street. If it does, I wouldn't be, terribly, terribly sad, because that was much more interesting than seeing a knockoff of Disney World. But it was an interesting experience, I suppose, for a boy to see all that stuff. And I could certainly see, though, why people who live in Manhattan would not want to go through that again, because experiencing it, just walking along the street, is very different from having to live in it day in, day out.
But look at you now. You're in a barbershop quartet.
Yeah, really.
It turned out okay.
Yeah. If I had walked down the street, like if I had been my age now and my height of about 6'5", if I had walked down the street looking like this, they'd probably think I'm some kind of pimp or whatnot.
Yeah, you look like an Easter pimp for sure. I'm picturing like little 7-year-old you. You're like, oh, peep show. I love marshmallows. Oh no!
I had no idea what I was looking at. I just like looking at the women, but it was really it was interesting. I have to say that I enjoyed it, although I was I couldn't make sense of the scarecrow until much later. But it is, I suppose, looking at the country on the whole, even beyond New York, it's sad to see what's become of a lot of cities. Period. Whether it's something like Chicago, where you basically have an urban war zone, something like New York, where you have a lot of squalor, and then in San Francisco, where you have, I don't even know how you put that into words. It's sort of like a third world society where you have people just doing whatever in the street, and then you have these, bastions of extreme wealth nearby, where even the people who live there aren't really safe from what goes on, but I guess they pretend to be. So it's really the American, I think, urban project has taken a turn for the worst, and that's very unfortunate because it didn't have to be this way.
Oh, and even when I was in Austin, like 2 months ago, it was like 6th Street, like the main drag of Austin. It should be like Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I mean, I hadn't been there since probably like 10 years. But yeah, there's you're just a couple streets off from 10 crackheads like walking up to you. Like I was like happy that I was like walking around with my boyfriend, because they'll just like, you stop 2 minutes to figure out how to use a scooter and they're like, whoop, they're like right there.
Well, Austin is becoming the new San Francisco, from all that I hear. It's really interesting, and the property values there are rising to almost San Francisco-like levels. In my neck of the woods, most people wouldn't know if I live outside of a mid-sized city. Now it's a mid-sized city, where I was born and where I spent most of my waking hours as a boy. But it has a crime rate that's basically on par with Philadelphia and such. But the crime is pretty controlled. It's limited to certain areas. So when you walk around the downtown or other places, you're probably not going to get killed. I mean, there's no guarantee, but it's interesting. So you can have cities that have very high rates of violent crime, where you're not being assaulted by crackheads. It really depends, I think, on how these cities handle themselves. But I mean, in any case, bad things can happen anywhere. But it's just it's interesting. I think the high rates of violent crime in American cities are never going to go away. I think that's just part of the American culture.
The American dream.
The American nightmare.
I've always wanted to punch somebody in the head on the E train and get away with it.
Well, it's in Florida. We have some pretty bizarre, especially down in Orlando, where they have an even more insane rate of violent crime. I mean, but there's just weird, like people hacking each other to death with machetes, somebody running over someone 12 times, somebody throwing someone like onto a party full of kids a few floors below.
Wow.
I will say that for whatever reason, when you hear about the crime, the violent crime down in Orlando, it's not just intense, but it's like strange, like people trying to outdo each other. And it's interesting. Most people only know Orlando because of Disney World or Universal and SeaWorld, but the city itself is not that. What most people know is called International Drive. But if you go into the city itself, it's very different. It's actually surprising. It's frighteningly normal looking, because a lot of it is pretty new. It looks very nice, but when you start walking around, unless you stay in a very narrow corridor, you're going to be in big trouble very quickly. I remember one night coming back from, I don't know if most people will know this, but if they're from Central Florida, they will. It's a city called Winter Park, very nice, north of Orlando. And I was driving through downtown. It was beautiful. It was around Christmas time, and everything was lit up. It was not many people were walking around outside because it was very dangerous, but it was beautiful.
The crackheads were caroling. It was beautiful.
If you just run into a crackhead, you're pretty lucky. But anyway, I'm not exaggerating. But anyway, as I was driving down, I meant to make a turn onto the Florida Turnpike. No, sorry, I-4. That's what I was going to go onto. But I made the wrong turn. And I wound up in this neighborhood, this sprawling slum. And it's the only place that I've been to thus far where I've seen bars on the church windows. There were people,
no.
Oh, yeah. And there were people out in the middle of the street with bonfires and all this stuff. It was interesting. So Florida has a lot of adventures, but some of these adventures are not what people should get themselves into.
I mean, Florida, man, used to be like the benchmark of insanity. And now, like, Florida is not so bad. I don't know. It's kind of a a little safe haven there. Thank you, Rojas. What is Chrissie's idea about Florida's politics? How many times has Chrissie been there? Impressions. I love Florida. I mean, I was there this past May. I was there last November for Thanksgiving. My dad lives down there. So I'm a big fan. Like I think what did DeSantis put into legislation, like you're not going to get in trouble if you accidentally like hit a protester, because we would see
Yes.
these protesters, like it would escalate so damn quickly. Like you just be trying to like go home, and within a matter of minutes, like someone would be opening your car, throwing you out of it, driving away in your car, beating the shit out of you. So it's like, yeah, you should be able to drive. I mean, that's like the one instance where you're not a regular pedestrian. Like you're there to wreak havoc and cause harm, especially if you start fucking with somebody in their car. Like that's just unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So big fan of DeSantis. I feel like he's gonna run. A lot of people think it's gonna be him and Trump, but I don't know. I've also felt like maybe Trump won't run because maybe he feels like he'll just throw his support behind like a DeSantis.
I think that his ego won't let him not run.
Yeah, like I'm gonna get you.
Exactly. But I think DeSantis is pretty much destined to run for president at this point. My take is that in a second, presuming that Trump, because it'd be a difficult race in any case in 2024, given where the politics of the country are headed. But if DeSantis, if Trump did get another term, I'm sure he'd pick DeSantis for like the attorney general's post, and then DeSantis would run for president in 2028.
Ooh, yeah.
2028, yeah, that'd be it. I just couldn't see him not running at this point. I think that he has had such a political star that's risen so quickly that he will find some way to sustain it, and I'm sure that we will hear more from him in the coming years when it comes to presidential runs.
He definitely has the hair for it, and I think that's half the battle.
It could be tough. It could be tough, but no, he does maintain his hair pretty well. He also is very popular in Florida. The state's getting more conservative, so or at least more Republican. So that's not really surprising that he's so popular here. But I think that he will easily. I almost would say no, but you never know what happens. But I will say I strongly think that he will easily win re-election. I don't think that will be even terribly competitive. And from there on, I think if Trump loses, DeSantis would be the heir presumptive for 2028. And if Trump wins, he would be in his cabinet and run in 2028 anyway. So I see DeSantis 2028 being a big thing. And I just don't think there's any two ways about that.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, and especially now with GETTR, we're going to be following it all closely. Mm-hmm. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Like this hour flew by.
It did. No, I've really enjoyed it. I even barely noticed that an hour went by. I really did enjoy, obviously, the chance to come on, Chrissie. It's great having you on Cotto Gottfried. I look forward to having you on again.
Yes. Oh God, we got another one. Rowhouse. He doesn't want us to go. For fun, last question. Do the both of you ever drink? What is your favorite beverage, alcoholic or non-mixed drinks? This is such a great question. Thank you, Rojas. And one that I can truly answer fully. I always, for a long time, I was a White Claw gal, but until I discovered not only Truly's, but Truly, the lemonade line, I find like really good, perfectly summery, would go very much with Joseph's hat there. They do like, it's like black cherry strawberry. It's like this whole lemonade mix and like really good. Obviously, like only 100 calories. You're not going to like break your caloric bank on it. However, it really depends. Like if it's before I'm going to get on stage, I will have one vodka soda and then cool it. But if I'm like out to dinner or whatever, it's like if I'm at a place where like they specialize in cocktails, I'll definitely do like fun cocktail. I'm definitely like a basic chick in that regard. But like go-tos, vodka soda for sure. Maybe a splash of cran if I'm feeling crazy.
I suppose that my favorite drink of all time would be a vodka martini, but I very much...
Ooh, yeah. Dirty or regular?
No, regular. I think that...
Keep it clean.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that... You know, it's kind of hard to say because otherwise it depends on my mood. Even for that, it depends on my mood. But I really do like port. I also like Moscato.
You're
That's a
the
great
only
one.
person in the world who drinks port.
Maybe so because I don't see it around nearly as often as it should be. But Moscato is great too. Sangria is also very good, as is champagne. But it all depends on the mood which one obviously is best.
Moscato, you're spending too much time in Miami.
It's big in Florida. That it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, it really is.
Mhm. But, a lot of people don't like very sweet wines that I like. I don't like the sort of dry white wines. I never got into them, but I do like the sweeter red ones. Although obviously Moscato is not. I mean that even though it's of a lighter color, it still tastes pretty sweet, at least to me. Not as nearly as sweet as port though. So I do like a lot of different kinds of wines, but my all-time favorite would be the vodka martini. But I also do like sangria. So depends on the mood.
Turn up. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, my sister
Mhm.
really likes red sangria. I'll drink some sangria. I'll do if there's a pitcher, I'll
Mhm.
get in on that.
Mhm.
But
As long as I'm not driving, of course, then everything
of
is fine.
course. What's a good port?
There is one winery here in Florida called Lake Ridge Winery. If you go there, it's one of the few parts of Florida that has hills, and it looks almost like Napa Valley. Not as drastic, obviously, but it's really great. It's called Lake Ridge, and they have an excellent port. It's one of the best that I've ever had, and I recommend that people get it if they're in Florida, or obviously if you're in a state where you could have wine delivered to you. I believe Lake Ridge does deliver it. You can buy it online. I mean, they don't have their own delivery service, so it's really an overlooked winery, Lake Ridge, but they have great stuff, and their port is something that I have never had a bad time with. It's very good, and they have many other different great types of wines as well. They can't make champagne because obviously what they grow there would not be considered that. But they have like a champagne. I wouldn't even want to say alternatives, more of a champagne equivalent that's very good. And it's definitely worth checking out. So Lake Ridge Winery, and I do not get a commission from them for referrals or anything
No,
like
nor do
that.
I get one from Truly or White Claw, unfortunately. I should hit them up to sponsor this pod. That would be great. I think I'm going to get into ports this summer, Joseph. I think this is going to be port girl summer. I have a feeling I'm just
Excellent.
going to I'm going to get
No, but
into it.
if it good, no, I think more people should drink port. It should be much more common than it is.
Mhm.
It's kind of sad that it isn't that common. And but Chrissy, thank you very much for having me on tonight. I really enjoyed it. It's interesting because my political views fall all over the place, but they pool toward the right. I guess nowadays a lot of folks will call me a conservative, even though my views are pretty, like I said, that they run the spectrum, even though they pool toward the right. But I think that there is. I'll just say this as we begin to leave here. I think there is a trend in American politics, at least insofar as the GOP goes, where it's not so much about the old school conservative movement. I never thought that that movement conservatism really was something that was all much worth writing home about. What I see happening now in the GOP is something syncretic, where you have basically like the walk away movement merged with a few other things to create a very unique non-left political apparatus. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Even though I'm not hopeful about the future of American politics, I think that the GOP will remain versatile enough to have a serious congressional presence, including congressional majorities, for many years as time goes on. Not necessarily consecutively, but they will remain competitive enough to, say, preserve the filibuster or be relatively close in the U.S. House as they are now. So I think there's a lot of good energy within the GOP now. I do see a lot of new people coming in. I certainly see a lot of innovation. I see more diversity, and not sort of like the forced stuff they saw during the Bush administration, where you had tokenism and all that,
Mhm.
very sort of cringeworthy, demeaning stuff. But it's really it is something else. The GOP is having several breaths of fresh air thrown into it, and I'm glad to see that. I really am.
Oh yeah, I think something like the walk away movement like had just an amazing ripple effect. Like that's probably hard to measure, but like I think so many of these small movements just are are helping. I don't know if the GOP gets like a little bit, like 10% more balls, that would be nice. I think that's a lot of people's chief complaint is like that they're just very upset. But I do think like, yeah, there's a new right, there's a new center. It's just like basically like anybody who's like not totally brainwashed is gonna fall somewhere, you know, in the middle or the right.
Certainly. And, the thing I suppose about the woke left is that it has a way, even though it has a way of having very devout adherents, it also has a way of annoying people profoundly. So I think there will always be some segment of the population that walks away. And the future of the GOP, contrary to what some people would like it, obviously we're not among those people, but it's not going to be the sort of, traditional button down conservative thing. I think it's going to be, you're going to see more transsexual GOP candidates. You're going to see pagan GOP candidates. You're going to see, obviously, lots of gay and lesbian ones. You're going to see lots of minority ones. And it's going to be interesting. It really will be interesting. It'll be basically a coalition of everyone who's not interested in wokeness. And the Democrats created that situation for themselves by becoming so ideological to the point of religiosity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everybody follow Joseph on Twitter at Joseph Ford Cotto. Anything else to plug or promote? And everybody buy his book, Runaway Masters, on Amazon. Or, if you don't want to support Amazon, I'm sure you can get it. Where else, Joseph?
It's not. Amazon will take a cut of the royalty regardless, but it will be on other platforms. I even forgot all of them. I don't even know if it's there yet, but it will be there soon enough. But right now, it is on Amazon. And even though I know a lot of people don't want to give Amazon the time of day, let alone the money, I think that it is worth it to get the book. And it will be out on Kindle on July 4th, and it will be free to read on Kindle if you have Kindle Unlimited. Otherwise, it'll be $4.99. So that's the situation there. I hope everyone, obviously gets the book. I hope they like it. I hope they learn something from it. And I really hope that the book has some impact in teaching people something about slavery in American history and the reality that that both the history of America and the history of the slave trade are much more complicated than people would like to admit, and that it's very bad to weaponize either or for the purpose of present day politicking. And one more time, here's the book. Hope people get it. Hope they like it. I'm very proud to have written it, and I'm very glad to have been here once again tonight, Chrissie. This was an outstanding conversation. Thank you again.
This was outstanding. The whole look was great. We kind of match. I feel like we could be in two rooms of the same house. Like this, it looks like you're literally like, right. Okay. Joseph, this was great. You are a joy, a delight, a blast.
So
smart. Always so good to talk to you. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Maybe I'll do your show. Who knows? No pressure, of course.
Oh no, I think I got an email that you're good on the 13th.
So cool. Awesome. All right, cool. It's happening. All right. Thanks, Joseph.
Very glad to be here, Chrissie. Thank you for having me. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.